do you think was happening? Said Harry next morning, when we could see bed quarters like that. It must be all to do with this fault line, Johanna replied, the join with the slumber downs. It's like the interference with the monitors at bed quarters. There's something going on at the windmill site that's messing everything up. The slumber downs and our downs are blurring into each other somehow. Good thinking, Johanna. That sounds about right to me, said a predictable voice. Mr. Phigg was juggling again. 2 satsumas this time, together with a golden hamster. Mr. Phigg! Johanna was outraged. You can't do that. It's cruel. No, it isn't, said Mr. Phigg, nonchalantly sending fruit and animal in a higher arc towards the ceiling. Johanna was beside herself. What do you mean? I can't believe it. Stop, she spluttered. Mr. Phigg smiled and finally brought his performance to a close, putting the satsumas and hamster onto the table, one at a time. He likes it, he said. Yes, I like it, confirmed the hamster in a relaxed and rather squeaky voice. He's our reinforcement, explained Mr. Phigg, an old friend of mine. He comes from a whole family of tumbling hamsters. They've been airborne for generations. The flying rodenti, said the hamster, bowing to the children. You may have heard of us, he added, before executing a neat forward roll and then walking a few paces on his front paws. No, I don't think I have, said Johanna. Well, allow me to introduce myself. The hamster stood to attention on his back paws and clicked his heels. The name is Derringer, Hoxton Derringer. He held out a paw, which the startled children eventually realised they were supposed to shake. Pleased to meet you, said Harry. How do you do, said Johanna. Hoxton is an unusual name. And so is Derringer, Harry added. Hoxton Derringer, Johanna repeated slowly. Have you quite finished? The hamster squeaked, his fur bristling. Perhaps we should analyse your names now. It's just that your name sounds all rugged, like an action hero in a film. But you... Oh no, what can I say now? Johanna did not know how to finish her thought politely, and Hoxton pounced. So, it was unusual for a hamster that you meant, wasn't it? I suppose I should be used to that sort of prejudice by now, but when it comes out so blatantly, what makes you think a film star can't be short and furry? Nothing. It's just that I haven't seen one like that before. Exactly. We've never had the chance. All those bigoted casting directors keeping us out of the spotlight ever since photography was invented. And you just go along with it. Sorry, said Johanna. Stop this persecution. Let my neglected species realise its potential. Sorry, said Johanna again. All right, said Hoxton, but watch it. He wagged his paw at her sternly for a while, before breaking into a broad grin. Can I have some of your cereal as compensation? As the hamster helped the children finish their breakfast, they told Mr. Phigg more about what had happened on the march. So, there has to be a link running through all this, Johanna concluded. The windmill, the nightmares, the boundary of the slumber downs getting messed up. But what is it? We need to have a closer look at the building site and see what's going on in there. How can we? Asked Harry. It's so well protected. Barbed wire, cameras, and all those scary guards. How could we get inside? I wonder if Dr. Solomon might be able to help, said Mr. Phigg. Who's he? He's an inventor. He comes up with all sorts of useful gadgets. Mr. Phigg took his silver key from his pocket and waved it in the air. Cuts my keys for me too. We should pop down to Wiltshire to see him. Hang on, said Johanna. Wiltshire? That's like 100 miles away. Hang on, said Mr. Phigg, imitating her voice quite well. Key, he held it under her nose. Gateway, he pointed to the door. There in no time. Which bit haven't you understood yet? He turned and walked towards the little door at the back of the kitchen. He does usually get the transport right, I suppose, said Hoxton, adding, Mind if I hitch a ride? Before running up Johanna's arm and perching on her shoulder. They all went through the little door and came straight out through an opening in an old mossy stone wall which was set around a neat country garden. A path led up to the front of a long single-storey building. A sign on its door read, Devises, Devices. Ring and enter. So they did. Mr. Phigg led the way up to a reception desk at the end of the hall, behind which an elegant Afghan hound in a tight silk dress was making entries in a diary. Hello, Kim, said Mr. Phigg. Is the doc at home? The dog looked up over her small spectacles. Good morning, Mr. Phigg. How lovely to see you. I'm afraid Dr. Solomon and Lawrence are in the middle of some sensitive research. They can't be disturbed. She raised a paw to her snout and lowered her voice. They particularly said they needed peace and quiet. That's a shame, said Mr. Phigg. Will they be long? At that point there was an enormous bang. A door at the other end of the corridor flew open, and a chimpanzee in a white lab coat rolled towards them through a cloud of smoke. I think your feet may be on fire, Lawrence, said Mr. Phigg. The chimpanzee leapt up and swatted out the glowing embers on some tattered bits of cloth around his ankles. It stings, he said. Oh, that wasn't supposed to happen. What was supposed to happen? We were just talking last night and wondered why pop socks are called pop socks. Then the doc said, what if they did? Did what? Pop. It's where a lot of his ideas come from, Kim explained. You can be talking to him about anything, the weather or your auntie or what you had for dinner, and suddenly he's off on some strange angle, drawing diagrams and planning. A second figure emerged from the still, smoky doorway and said, The equations could probably have done with a bit more checking before we moved to the prototype of this one. It was a large buzzard with piercing eyes, a circle of white neck feathers setting off his sleek brown plumage. He was also wearing a lab coat, a tattered one with a number of holes burnt through, and a belt with hammers and spanners and other tools hanging off it. Oh well, we won't make the same mistake again. Just some different ones, I expect, said Lawrence, still rubbing his feet. Then Mr. Phigg introduced everyone to everyone else, and they all went into Dr. Solomon's workshop for a glass of Kim's homemade lemonade. Mr. Phigg explained what had been happening and why they wanted to get into the windmill site, before concluding, So, Doc, have you got any clever gadgets which might do the trick? Let me see, said Dr. Solomon. Covert entry. The hover hat would get you over the wall, but it's a bit noisy. The wonder miner could tunnel underneath, but the guards might notice a 6-foot hole opening up in front of them, said Lawrence. Isn't this a job for the meta-wetter? Dr. Solomon looked doubtful. I don't know about that. We're still testing it. But you always say that we can only go so far in the workshop and that things need a trial in the field. And the meta-wetter is specifically designed for a field, after all. What does a meta-wetter do? Asked Johanna. Come and have a look. Dr. Solomon got up and led them to the other end of the workshop. There was a square frame about 6 feet high, covered in canvas. They could see a shower head mounted on the top of the frame and pointing inwards. Johanna pulled a flap of canvas to one side and looked in. A portable shower. Is it for camping? Yes, it was originally, said Dr. Solomon, but we've made a few modifications. He pointed inside to the controls. We took the thermostat out, so the water's always cold, added Lawrence, but we've put in some interesting options instead. Johanna read out the settings on the dial. Shorter water. Grow flow. No show. What does all that mean? The first one makes you smaller. The second makes you bigger. And the third one makes you invisible. Really? Asked Harry excitedly. Really, said Dr. Solomon, but no more than 10 minutes at a time. We haven't been able to make it last any longer than that. That should do nicely, said Mr. Phigg. Can we borrow it? Dr. Solomon frowned. We really haven't finished the testing yet. Something odd might happen. Isn't that the idea? Asked Hoxton. If nothing odd is going to happen, it won't be working. I'll be happy to give the grow flow a try, purely in the interests of science, you understand. And when an inventor hasn't got a guinea pig, a hamster's not a bad alternative, you know. Go on, said Mr. Phigg. Please, said Johanna. Please, Harry added. Oh, all right then. But Lawrence will have to come along to keep an eye on things. And we've only got enough mixture for one shot on each setting. So no fun and games, Hoxton. We'll do a few more tests, then pack it up. You can collect it on Tuesday.